Thank you. Well, we're back. So this is the last session, and I hope that we get all your attention. And I was told that this is deliberate. We kept the most exciting to the end, so that you have to stay all the way. So I think this is a good strategy. I guess before I start off, I do want to kind of give a little bit more introduction to my guest here. So Federico, as he was introduced, he's the president of the EuroCham, as well as Executive Director, Credit Suisse Wealth Management Asia Pacific. He also holds various other roles, such as VP of ESSO Camerastrio, the apex body of the Italian Chambers of Commerce abroad, and board member of various institutions, including UN Global Impact Singapore, SBF, Euro-Asian Business Council, and ACORD. So that's a lot, so I'm sure we're going to hear a lot from you. And I also want to then introduce Jeffrey. Jeffrey, as he was introduced, he's the MD and COO of Enterprise Singapore. And in his role, he leads the agency to work with companies, as we all know, to build capabilities, innovate and internationalize, as well as support the growth of Singapore as a hub for global trading and startups. Prior to his current appointment, Jeffrey was Principal Private Secretary to PM Lee. He has also served in other capacities at the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Manpower, PM's office, and MOE as well. So thanks, Jeffrey, for joining us this afternoon. And we have Satya. We know Satya well because he's also serving on our Digital Trust Committee. So welcome, Satya. So Satya is a partner with KPMG in Singapore, and he's the head of the infrastructure, government, and healthcare sector. He has close to 25 years of experience advising both governments and private sector clients in the region. And prior to joining KPMG, Satya worked with MNCs in Asia and the Middle East. Welcome, Satya. Last but not least, Sheila. Sheila is the Chief Human Resource Officer of Prudential Singapore and also a certified IHRP Master Professional. And prior to joining Prudential Singapore, she was the Human Capital Leader for PwC Singapore Consulting and the Group HR Director overseeing regional operations at Syndicatum Sustainable Resources. So welcome, Sheila. And as you can see, we have a very, very strong panel, and we have only about just slightly over an hour. So let's try to get through it. We already have some questions coming in, but I would like to actually first kind of walk us through some of the things that we spoke about today. And maybe we can start off by talking a little bit about the role of TACs. And if you don't mind, Jeffrey, because I kind of arrowed you just now, so I want to actually put this first question to you. So obviously today, many government agencies work closely with TACs. And you're supporting us to amplify our messages, to broaden outreach of the initiatives and programs, as well as conduct programs on our behalf. So being the key agency working with TACs, what are your observations on the TACs today? So to your point, have the role of the TACs changed over the years, and what roles would you like to see us performing?
Thanks very much, Ian. First of all, I want to say how happy I am to be here. It's been such a long time that we've had an event of such size, such magnitude. I was here for the dinner, I think, a couple of days ago, and already you could feel the energy coming back. You know that people feel that there's a sense of recovery. So this is my first panel discussion, a major one, and originally last week when I was preparing for it, I was quite nervous. You know, what am I going to say to all our friends at the TACs? Then I found out last week that PM was going to make his speech today, and I realized that it wasn't not going to be too difficult after all. And people are not going to remember what we said anyway. They'll be busy doing other things. But you know, many of us have either watched and read what PM said today, feel that okay, you know, it's a good sign. Everybody's happy. They're almost celebratory. But I wanted to take you back maybe 2 years ago when we were dealing with the start of COVID. And actually, if you remember, it was really, really tough times for our businesses. The government had to step in quite aggressively, in an unprecedented fashion to support our businesses, providing job support, rental relief, temporary bridging loans. But we could not have done it without the help of the TACs. Quite frankly, why? Because there's no way the government can reach out to every single business on the ground. No way that we could have understood what were the difficulties that each enterprise, SME, they were facing. So all of you played a very important role. You played a very critical role for us. You communicated the interests of the TACs to us, and sorry, of the enterprises to us, and you enabled the government to very quickly refine what it needed to do, extend the help to businesses as quickly as we could. You were essentially a multiplier for us. Now, after 2 years, COVID-19 is hopefully we're out of the woods. At the turn of the year, we were hoping to change gears a little bit. We were hoping to say, okay, the economy is recovering. Maybe we can shift gears, look at growth opportunities again. Right now, the economic environment remains fairly challenging. There's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. There's still geopolitical uncertainty. Businesses face high energy prices, manpower crunch, and there's a good chance that we will be facing a stagflation scenario later on this year. So a lot of these factors are external. We can't do much about it. We would still have to continue to prepare ourselves for what is a long road ahead as the economy recovers. And that's where I think the government will need to continue to partner all of you to help us push forward, to seize new opportunities, to internationalize, innovate, and to upgrade and invest in human capital. All the wonderful things that you all have been doing pre-COVID, we have to continue doing and continue to do it with more energy. The only difference is this, that now, having gone through the last 2 years of great difficulty, actually businesses, EACs, the government have a relationship, a stronger relationship, a stronger bond, a stronger trust in one another. And we have a process that now works very well for us to be able to get help quickly, get support quickly to businesses on the ground. And we can use this process again to forge the way forward. So that's how I would see it. I think we are looking forward to the year ahead. It's not going to be as rosy as we had hoped, but I think with all of us working together, we'll have a good chance of getting through.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I've got a couple of questions for you, but I'm going to let you take a bit of a rest. I'm going to ask Federico along a similar question. So, obviously, as a fellow TAC, so how do you see the role of TACs evolve to remain relevant to our members?
Well, first of all, I think that the role of TAC evolved during the pandemic, at least in Singapore, in a positive way. I couldn't be more thankful for the engagement that was constant. You know that as well. MOS just now was alluding to meeting we had with TAC and herself a few weeks ago. And these meetings were happening all the time. And Zoom, of course, was facilitating this, but to the point that became really the rhythm accelerated a lot. Were all the feedback taken into consideration? I believe so. Were all the feedback transformed into reality? No, clearly, because that would be an ideal world. But I think that the constant opportunity to engage and to bring our point forwards was something to be grateful for, because it's not to be taken for granted. And some of these things we saw we went back relentlessly to comment, especially on travel restriction that were for us and for my constituency was very important. We went back into really trying to advocate as much as we can for what we believe was to be done. And to some extent, we were successful. So I believe that this was paramount, and the constant consultation is what the TAC stands for, because there is no possibility for any company to have the same reach out and the same level and intensity of engagement that the TAC has. And that's because they are not the same forum. Of course, if you are a big investor, government listen to you, and especially Singapore government is very keen to listen from businesses, audiences, and to understand the struggle. But the TAC has much more edge, because the consultation table are just more, and because you represent much more than a single company. So I think that this was tremendously increased during the pandemic. So I believe and I hope it will continue. And it will continue, and I'm certain it will continue for the reason we just heard before from Minister of State. There are clearly two winners out of the pandemic. One, digital, that you are the master of here, and sustainability, where we believe from the European economies to have a lot to share, and we are sharing with Singapore government. So again, On topics, I think that to work close with us and to work with our companies is the only way forward to make sure that upskilling of people cannot come only top down. If we don't have the people, we cannot invent them. And I think that we definitely have a role to play and more role to play.
Well, thanks for that. And I certainly, resonate with that, and I would also say that, a lot of conversations today is about how TACs collaborate. So I think, Jeffrey, this question is coming. So Moslow earlier mentioned about 80% support for high impact TAC projects in areas such as digital transformation and sustainability. So I wonder, are you at the liberty to kind of give us a little bit more details around that?
Actually, I should make a small correction. I mean, fortunately, she's not around now, but it's 90%.
Oh, that's even
Yeah.
better.
Well,
Okay, everyone, record that down. It's
Well, for
90%.
projects where there is industry initiated or with projects where there's cross TAC collaboration, ESG is obviously prepared to support more. But if you're talking about sustainability projects, that's very important for us because we know that in the coming years, sustainability is going to be a big transition that our SMEs will need to make. And you have seen what's happening around the world. Regulations are tightening up. You have seen how the carbon tax is going up. So the environment is changing. I remember during one of my first visits, I don't know whether I'll get this story right, so Ernie, you'll have to help me. When I visited SFIC, he was telling me about the story of this furniture company who had exported furniture to China. And because the furniture didn't make the formaldehyde regulations, the furniture couldn't be sold in China. So it had to be taken back. But because the furniture did not make the regulations for export out of China, the furniture could not be taken back. So it was stuck there. So things can change on us very quickly. And we have to do something about it. We have to make sure that our companies are ready. The question is whether or not we see sustainability as an opportunity or a threat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and yesterday I think Tan Su Shan from DBS was here. She spoke about sustainability and she spoke about how SMEs should look at this as an opportunity. She said, look at it as in three ways. Number one, supply chains. How can we make sure that our supply chains are sustainable? Number two, look at energy efficiency because that's going to be very important for us. Number three, certification standards. And these are all three things that our schemes at Enterprise Singapore will very much support. I mean, I just talked very quickly about the Enterprise Sustainability Scheme, Program, which I think you all know. It is actually a broad program that we've set up that is more demand-led. If so, you have projects that you think will help you make this transition towards better sustainability. The program is there for us to help you, to support your projects. On top of that, we will also be proactive in going forward to do things like training workshops, helping you do consultancies, developing sustainability road mapping for your industry. And you saw one project already, or a few projects already. MOS mentioned the hotel industry and the hotel association earlier.
Yeah.
I think even before that, the textile and fashion and TAF, the TAC had already developed something for the fashion sustainability industry, a roadmap very clearly articulated where we are going to go. And we want to encourage all of you here to do the same. Look at your industry, look at what you think you need to do, encourage your businesses to make that transition.
Well, thanks for that. I think for us at SG Tech, it's certainly very encouraging to actually firstly hear about such schemes. And also, like some of our fellow associations out there, they have actually also started their own sustainability committee. So a lot of times what we also say to ourselves is that we're not here to duplicate, and let's not, like I said, reinvent the wheel, or let's not repeat, but let's go out there and talk to our fellow TACs and ask, okay, what is it that we can do together? So it's really this whole thing about leveraging and the whole thing about 1+1=3 kind of model. So this is also a good way to shift gears to talk about sustainability. So I want to direct a question to you, Satya. So essentially, as you know, as a regional hub, right? So Singapore has this net zero journey, and it's tightly connected to the rest of ASEAN. So from your experience, how do you think Singapore can or should raise its profile and visibility as a regional leader and thrive as the choice location for sustainable business? And of course, what role do you think TAC can take on to facilitate that?
Thank you, Ian. I think, first of all, I just want to echo Jeffrey's sort of sense of real joy at firstly seeing such a large group of people, and of course meeting a number of friends who I have not seen in person for a long time. So it's really a pleasure to be here to talk to all of you. Uh, and we are standing between you and your evening drinks. So I hope we can make it a little more exciting so that you can go on a high. Uh, you made a very you've asked a very kind of broad question, Yen. So I'll try and answer it as best as I can. Uh, I think Singapore needs to build on its strengths, and if you look at what are the strengths Singapore has, and that goes to Jeffrey's point earlier about looking at this as an opportunity rather than as a threat. One of the most important strengths is credibility and trust. And if I if I look at uh, what is the biggest contribution Singapore can make to ASEAN in its journey to sustainability, is really use that brand to bring all of ASEAN together with it. So if you see today, and many of you are hearing all these stories of how companies are looking at this in a very opportunistic way, trying to take advantage of both uh, schemes or financing opportunities, and around the world, creating, taking projects and greenwashing them, for want of a better word. But Singapore really can stand out as an exemplar of credibility and trust in this space, because these are still early days for sustainability. I mean, even though we've been talking about it for a long time, this is when really the money is going to work to make sustainability real. So investors, funds, bankers are all now very, very concerned about whether their money is going to the right place. Recently, we had some very wide coverage about clothes which are exported to markets from some developing countries, where these are supposed to have been grown in a certain way. The cotton was supposed to have been grown in a certain way with certain less pesticides or materials. And you go back, and how do you trace all of this? So there is a lot of work to be done in building credibility and trust in products as they are exported. Uh, so I think this brand that Singapore has is the first, real I see strength that Singapore should exploit. And I'll just briefly talk later about how we might do that as we go ahead. The second interesting point is scale. You'll be surprised. Singapore is very small in some areas, but it's actually got huge scale when you look at carbon emissions. And that scale, comes in some ways from sectors like travel and trade. We, so much of the world's travel and trade pass through Singapore that a lot of the carbon emissions touch Singapore in one way or another. So Singapore has a position to use that opportunity to use that position of scale to actually create innovations in these sectors uh, to again be a pathfinder for the region. So look at, for example, maritime. And this is one sector which is really challenged by the upcoming net zero question. And there are many paths in maritime. I mean, in land transport, it is much easier. It's, we have a solution, electrification, electric vehicles. And, if countries move fast enough, at least that part of the value chain is decarbonized. But in maritime, the solutions are not straightforward. So if you look at the trade, the maritime space, Singapore has a lot of, uh, you know, uh, capacity to innovate and be a leader for the region and probably even globally. And you talked about being a global node, right? So Singapore is a global node. And likewise in aviation, right? I mean, uh, if you look at, that's another sector which is significant. We're all going to travel a lot more, hopefully with a little more guilt, so we can, buy maybe voluntary carbon credits, when we are taking our flights. Uh, but again, that's another sector. And why I say all of this is we've done some work in KPMG on this question, and we actually found that in the net zero position, actually Singapore has a lot of potential to go up when you compare countries like Norway, which have a large domestic economy, but they don't have a large trade and travel economy, right? So I think this way, Singapore has a real opportunity to grow. Now, when I look at uh, the fact that the financial markets are going to be an important part of all of this. So businesses, government, and finance have to come together to really solve this really, really difficult problem that we have we have in front of us. And again, in this regard, Singapore has made the first steps with looking at carbon, the carbon CIX, and there's a lot more to come in terms of green finance and similar solutions. But fundamentally, finance driving the movement of industry to find the solutions is another area where Singapore can play leadership for ASEAN. Again, here I want to share Singapore took leadership in the data center space by putting a moratorium in 2017. And if you look at it, uh, Singapore is looking to step back or step forward from that by asking for offsets. And those offsets for the new data centers, I mean. And those offsets actually have to come from mostly the region. And here, Singapore and the region can work together, leveraging the natural advantages that ASEAN may have in terms of its natural capital, while enabling the growth of the regional economy through, allowing for, carbon to be used in a more deliberate kind of way. So I see these as kind of the immediate areas where Singapore can contribute. And happy to discuss further.
Yeah,
Thank-
Ian, if you
thanks.
don't mind, I'll just step
Yes,
in and
please.
just chip in
Yep.
to what Satya just said. I mean, I fully agree with everything that she said. But I just wanted to add, I spoke earlier about how sustainability was an opportunity for SMEs. But actually, if you take a little bit of a step back, it is a huge opportunity for Singapore. As he mentioned, we have several things that are going for us: sustainable finance, regulations, credibility. Actually, all this put together is an important opportunity for us. And we have to look at, more broadly, what is the next game for Singapore. We've had make major moves with major projects before. We've had Jurong Island last time. We had our biopharmaceutical hub. Arguably, the integrated resort was also a major platform which led to a growth in retail and tourism. And then now recently the digital economy, right? Where the Google, Facebooks, the tech giants are all here. But what is our next game? I see really the sustainable economy as the next game. And that's something that plays to our strengths because it enables Singapore to be able to bring together the best of what we have, integrate it, which is really our strength, and create opportunities for us. And we really have to seize this opportunity. We are not really quite ahead at the moment. If you look at many other cities in the world, we are really not quite seen as the paragon of sustainability. But things can change very quickly. In my previous incarnation, which is where I actually got to know Satya, I worked for him before. I worked at the Ministry of Transport. I confess that when I was there at the Ministry of Transport, we looked at electric cars rather suspiciously.
I remember.
Yeah, the guy who owned the first Tesla, some of you will remember, right? Yeah. So I was the one who said, no, it doesn't make sense for us to bring Teslas here because at that time, our energy mix and how we produce electricity was not really quite efficient. And so even if you brought a Tesla here, it wouldn't make an appreciable difference. It just shifted where your pollution was from the road to where the energy or the electricity was produced. But now it's different. Within a few years, I mean, it's less than a decade now, we are there. I think we can be a leader in the electric vehicle space. Certainly on the public transport side, on the buses, we are going great guns. And by the time in 2030, which is I think MOT's commitment now, to try to move our whole fleet to, I think it's 2030, if not, I might have gotten it wrong, but to move a whole fleet to electric, I think we have a chance and we can move it very quickly if we wanted to.
So on that note, I do want to ask Sheila to chime in about what does this then mean in terms of sustainability for human capital or human capital development?
Thank you very much, Jen. And Jeffrey, thank you for talking about opportunities, because I think there's been a lot of narrative about talent crunch, dearth for talent. But just listening in on the panelists in terms of what is possible for Singapore and the opportunities ahead, let me then say that actually this is what your workforce is asking for. Your future employees, they are socially conscious individuals who want to join an organization that has a purpose, knows why it exists, and more importantly, who they are going to be in that construct in contributing to the nation's sustainability agenda. So Yen, I loved your presentation when you spoke about you guys starting off with purpose and really why you exist and redefining your 40-year heritage. And we did something similar at Prudential as well. I mean, we had an 85-year heritage when we said, okay, guys, let's go back to fundamentals. You all know us as an insurance company, but we went back and said, what exactly is insurance in the context of everyday Singaporeans? And we came up with a very simple statement about why me and my colleagues turn up for work every day, which is to help people get the most out of life, right? Very broad statement. But when you make a promise about helping people get the most out of life, number one, it gets you laser focused on who these people are. What are you going to do to make the quality of their lives better? And then it challenges you also to deliver on that purpose and articulate what that means to your existing employees as well as your future employees. So mindset for me is a very difficult word. There are many layers on mindset and we could have a whole conference about mindsets. But if we kind of distilled that and spoke about organizational approach to encouraging a mindset that is long term, purpose driven, what are people going to get if they come and be part of your organization, be part of your TAC? I think that's a great place to start, right? Now, of course, that doesn't mean you stop there, because as an organization there's a responsibility to bring your people along, help them understand what sustainability means, because it's huge, right? And what we can do in our everyday roles to help the sustainability narrative. So how does my investment colleagues look at, okay, how do I decarbonize our investment portfolios? My risk colleagues who are looking at everyday business and really considering, if we undertake an initiative, is this going to be net positive or net negative? And so being able to articulate that and bring that and make that real is, I would say, the first step to
Yeah.
building that sustainability mindset,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So I think it's opportunities more so than challenges. And if we got that narrative right, I'm quite sure people will be clamoring to jump on the sustainability
Well,
bandwagon.
absolutely. Thanks, Sheila. So I want to ask Federico, because Europe has actually gone on the sustainability journey for many years.
Yeah.
So what are some of the lessons? And obviously, I think you brought your passion with you. So could you share with us, some of the, I guess, the experience from that perspective, and what's the role of the TACs there?
He's got a very good 5-minute pitch, which I've heard before.
But let me change it slightly. Then, thanks for reminding the EV struggle that, as a chamber, we advocate so many times to Singapore government with modest success in the past, but likely, as you said, now is moving really fast. And I think that the reason why we are advocating is because Singapore has, in essence, at least for public transport, the perfect infrastructure. On private, there are more concerned with how HDB has designed and whatsoever, but on public, definitely there is a chance. If I can bring the, in my opinion, what we hear on sustainability a bit on planet Earth in general, because we hear pledges, everybody has to be net zero, 2030, 2050, somebody doesn't remember anymore by when, we have to do it. Then you go at COP26, you hear something, and then at G20 you hear something, but what does it mean? I mean, what is really, we have to be net zero, we have to be fast, we have to pledge. So allow me to say one thing. Let's take the cost of not doing it. I am a cynical, yeah, it will be better to be in a better world, but I don't care because I want to make my profit and I don't care to be sustainable, right? So there are endless and countless numbers that are telling you the cost, because we focus only sometimes on saying, yes, we have to do it, it's great, there is an opportunity for our country, okay. And then ESG is costly, so I don't do it. So let's take what are the sure costs for not doing it. And in my opinion, there are some. Number one, you risk, and I will tell you why, in few years to run out of money in terms of out of investor. We risk to run out of consumer, because consumers are vastly looking at how sustainable is your product. 50%, I think, on electric vehicles, 50% of consumers, if I'm not mistaken, are willing to pay a premium, a significant premium to buy an electric vehicle. Even developing countries are developing solutions on this front. China is the biggest, by far, producer of EVs. Then you risk to run out of employee. We had a great pitch about talent, and the lower you go on age, the higher is the percentage of importance that younger generation are placing on your plan in terms of sustainability. I'm sure that our friend from Prudential know it. 40% of employer seems to choose, at least in Western world, but I don't think it's very different here, to choose their place of choice in terms of employment based also on the sustainable plan of the company. And you cannot fool them around anymore with greenwashing, because they're getting very, very, very skilled. People decide to remain in their job also for reason connected to sustainable agenda of the company. I said investors in the beginning because every investor, institutional investor, has either by regulator or by choice the need to invest in sustainable company. And so if you're not sustainable, the guy cannot give you the money. So, and that's another reason. If you go on the public market and you are a listed company, you want to issue a bond, or non-listed, you issue your bond. The premium of the bond is higher. If you look at infrastructure market, there is a premium that is paid by non-green versus green. So you have endless numbers. And the most intriguing one, in my opinion, is, of course, you can take it for what it is, but there are studies showing that, study run by on Standard & Poor's company from 2005 to 2015, showing that you could predict 90% of bankruptcies by looking at the ESG rating in the previous 5 years. So does it mean that if you're not sustainable, you default? No, but it means that you multiply your risks, litigation risk, government won't give you subsidies. So in a nutshell, you run out of government subsidies, you run out of investor, you run out of consumer, and you could run out of talent, when talent is by far the most difficult asset to get from any competitive company, especially in a place like Singapore, where you have many nice places to choose from. So for all these reasons, I think that these are the arguments why you have a fixed negative externality if you don't do it, before even looking at why to do it. And allow me to close on one thing that is on geographies. We have the assumption that is a Western thing. I mean, yeah, they are ahead because it's, but I bring an example from Singapore. If we all agree that a big chunk of greening the economy is urbanization, if we agree that, I don't know, but huge percentage of what make our world sustainable is in urbanization, the concept of urbanizing a certain way, and the concept of creating, after you have a prosperous society, the greenest city in Southeast Asia is not a European statesman who made it, is not an American statesman who made it, it's Lee Kuan Yew who said it in 1968, but his ambition was to make Singapore the greenest city in Southeast Asia. As a matter of fact, Singapore, if you saw the picture in 1968, was not exactly there, and you have a result which is massive. So I think that the opportunity here for Singapore is they outshine in many aspects, like urbanization, the integrated park, Mandai, what you're doing in Mandai, integrating all the zoo and the bird park, and it's an example. And maybe some aspect where there is a lot of catch up to do, and at least now there is the will to do with a very ambitious Green Plan 2030, where our role, if I can conclude on the TIC role, is really to try to bring some of the example expertise to try to, a lot of expertise are done with Singaporean, and to work in partnership to make it a win together.
Now, thanks for that, and thanks for reminding us that actually Singapore is already a green city before the green is the thing, right, so to speak. So anyway, I've got this question from the audience, and it can be answered by anyone. So the question is, what do you see as being the supporting pillars that can be used and ultimately implemented in practice by SMEs to achieve sustainability, especially considering that the sustainable goals can be abstract? So anyone, would you like to have a go?
Maybe I'll
Satya?
take a shot. Yeah. I think one of the important points, and I didn't answer the second part of your question, so let me answer that before I come to this. The role the TACs can play in driving some of the sustainable agenda. I think this sustainability is very much in a formative stage in terms of potential uh, solutions as well as business opportunities that are emerging, because business models are changing rapidly, and the TACs actually can play a very important role in cross-fertilizing these ideas between their own members, but also I think it was mentioned by the minister, I believe, my Moss, in cross-fertilizing across TACs as well. Because let's be clear, and I go back to the transport point, uh, the electric vehicles are a new breed of vehicle, right? They bring together convergence of different industries, but also note that they also bring new ideas on payments, of how you will pay for some of the charging and so on. There's increasing convergence which is happening alongside the drive towards becoming more sustainable. So they're both within a TAC, the members learning from each other, and across TACs, I think there's a real opportunity. And in all of this, it's about how do you test bed ideas and rapidly learn from each other. So I see that as a big opportunity. So what would an SME, or how should an SME be thinking about it? We think the first step is really understanding your carbon footprint, not just of your own organization from end to end, raw material to finished product, but going back further. And you see, this is one of the biggest issues today, which is haunting many organizations in relation to product. So, for example, like Jeffrey was talking about the formaldehyde problem, there are many other sort of less tangible problems, like, are you using child labor in your, not you, are your suppliers using child labor in their farms? Uh, and so I won't buy from you if just because I'm not sure of the origin of your raw material. So you need to start thinking about what are the risks to my raw material supply chain, where are they coming from, and do I need to get into sources which are more verified and authentic and will not compromise me with my customers. So that's the not just looking at your own value chain, but looking back. I think and in this regard, looking at the footprint and understanding it involves another step, which is, and I think we're probably dipping a bit into the technology question here. Earlier, we had to do everything with, pen and paper, right? Now, there is a lot of technology available through sensors, through, the IoT devices, uh, and then using cloud alongside it to capture some of this data and then start analyzing it. So once you understand your value chain, find out what's the best and cheapest way to collect that data on an ongoing basis, then understand and then start analyzing that data in terms of, where are my emissions really happening in my supply chain, uh, and what is that, what is the extent and scope of those, and then moving on. The best part of what today's technology can do is to actually do a lot of analytics with that data, as well as machine learning on a very uh, large scale. And this is also where I think this doesn't have to be limited to the enterprise. It can go beyond the enterprise. It can go into clusters of organizations which are working to deliver a end product to a customer. And Jeffrey spoke about Jurong Island. If you think about Jurong Island, it's an amazing thing which happened on the industrial scale for petrochem. Product goes from one to the other with little or no physical movement. It's all going through pipes, right?
Yep.
And you think about the same thing with data in a sustainable, future sustainable way, is how do you take that data, how do you crunch it, how do you do machine learning with it and understand and get insights about where your opportunities are and where your issues are. So doing that, we think is really getting to understand, firstly, where are the opportunities and where are the problems. And then I think from there on, you take it from there. That would be our view. And in all of this, I think Singapore again has an opportunity to take leadership in looking at the standards and the disclosure requirements uh, in all of these areas, right?
Right.
So for example, in the built environment, last year, it was announced to do a common data environment, right?
Mhm.
And I think the question now is, how does the industry use that in a way that is meaningful and makes the industry much more productive and more sustainable, right? So
Right.
that's just an example of how you might do that.
Right.
Can I jump in
Yes,
just
please.
to make a
Yes.
comment? I mean, I love this cross-pollination, cross-TAC interactions, etc. Right? Because the question was about an SME, and sometimes larger organizations have the resources to go find out and discover everything on their own. But as SMEs, how do you come together as a collective, and how does the TAC come in as what I call the marketplace, a place of
Yeah.
exchange on ideas, knowledge, but also how do we come together to build the capabilities that we need to further the sustainability agenda, or for that matter, the talent that we need to exploit the opportunities that we're speaking of. I mean, we're a participant of the Skills Future Queen Bee initiative, and our role, the Prudential, is to work with SMEs to see what can we do to support the ecosystem. How can we bring some, innovative thinking ideas, digital capabilities, anything around building culture. So how can this concept of an exchange be further enhanced beyond just knowledge, but actually capability build and exchange, I think is something quite exciting to explore.
Yeah.
And in fact, walk away with the belief that you're not alone. You have someone to work with because it's a collective issue.
Well, thanks for that. And in fact, there was a question to ask, what are some of the things that we can do differently? I think you guys are kind of indirectly answered that. So I want to shift gears from sustainability, but certainly, I think one of the key messages is obviously that there's a higher price if we don't do it. So I do want to touch on digitalization at the moment. So one of the things that I spoke about earlier was about trust. And one of the questions that came out is, what's the role of trust in digital transformation and digitalization, and how can TAC speak to members on this new topic? So I'm very tempted to pass it on to Satya, but I won't do that immediately. Or do you want to? Does someone want to take the question?
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
So this conversation on digitalization started way before the pandemic for us as an organization. And while I spoke about our heritage, it also speaks to how entrenched as an organization we were in doing work and delivering what our customers wanted. Now, getting into a space that was considered new, different, created a level of, let's just say, insecurity amongst our workforce who had been with us for a while. And what does this mean for me? What is machine learning? Am I going to be able to figure this out? And one of the things that we did as an organization was really address the issue head on, i.e., security for people. Is my jobs going to disappear? What's going to happen? And our mantra, Yen, you spoke about your mantra just now. Our mantra was that your role may disappear, but you do not need to disappear. And in doing that, how, as an organization, I believe we were able to start building that trust quotient with our employees to say, stay the course. We will support you. We will enable you. We will make the digital literacy and education available to you. But it's just not about education, but it's also about translating that to roles. And as we speak, I have a fifth of my organization going through a career conversion conversation. And a large part of that is about, being digitally savvy and how do I do my job differently. And a fifth of these guys will have different jobs. But these jobs, which will keep them relevant, will keep them interested, and in employment. And to top that off, we also removed our retirement age back in 2018 as well. So really organizationally stripping away barriers and working at it one piece at a time builds the trust quotient.
Thanks, Sheila. Satya, do you want to build on that?
Yeah. So I think the question of trust is, in my view, uh, something which, if you think about technology, uh, it's it sort of distances you from trust in a way, right? So you have to use your brand to then build that trust. Um, so from our perspective, I think the work has to involve two levels of opportunity. One is working with your suppliers, your customers, and your employees in creating an environment where sharing of data becomes safe.
Yeah.
And we've seen that is a problem. I mean, even with the largest of companies, if you take advantage of your customer data, then there is a backlash. So we think that uh, building that trust at all of those levels is a very important question. And therefore, when you move from the physical to the virtual, I think this is an important leap that has to happen as well, where uh, I think the work that, say, SG Tech, for example, is doing is very, very critical. And you have to address this at, as I said, so if you think about it, uh, how do you do that? So do you give a trust mark as one approach, but there is also an element of the customer supplier employee relationships, which have to be built on contracts and relationships, which allow that data to flow in a way that then digitalization becomes easier to happen. And it's that very same question we're kind of trying to address in the built environment context, because all the standards are there, all the information, potentially the architecture is there. It's about how do you populate it with the information that's needed to get the pipes flowing with the data. So that is how we would see that as an important next step.
Yeah. Thanks, Satya. So, Jeffrey, maybe I should ask you about the fact that obviously today we spoke a lot about TAC's collaboration, and ecosystems digitalization. So, in your opinion, is there anything else that you feel that we should do, or what are some of the ESG priorities that you want to share with us? That gets on our radar.
Specific on digitalization?
Digitalization, yes.
Okay. Well, if there's anything that was a silver lining out of COVID, I guess digitalization was one. I remember I was writing, helping PM write the National Day Rally speech in 2017. I don't know whether those of you will remember, that was the diabetes National Day Rally. And one of the three topics that was in the National Day Rally was talking about digitalization, about smart nation. And we had, used examples of how we wanted more hawkers to use QR codes and digitalize. We were pushing against the grain because we knew actually no hawker at that time wanted to do any of that, because they wanted the cash ready in hand. There wasn't a particular technology that was useful. We even used examples of how it was being done in China to tell our own people, hey, this is what you should do. But look at how things have changed. Now with COVID, every micro enterprise, every small and medium enterprise knows that if you don't digitalize, it's over. There's no game to play. And to everybody's great credit, actually, they have stepped up. Now even hawkers use delivery.
Yes.
You go there, you use a QR code, you can do it. Even the CDC vouchers, if you go to Ayer Rajah Food Center, you will find that all the stalls there are very happily using the
Yeah.
CDC voucher to collect. And that has become a movement. And it is a good movement, which means that everybody, even down to the people who were not maybe initially disposed to digitalization, are now on board. The PSG grants, right? The Productivity Solutions grant. Some people call it the Every Restaurant an iPad grant. There's some truth to that, but there is the benefit is really we moved everybody together. But I think the important thing to remember is that we are not the only ones that make this move. Every other country, every city in the world has also made this move. And so therefore, yes, we have made some steps towards making our businesses more digitalized now. Maybe some even, as Yen nicely put it, maybe some have even made a big step towards digital transformation now. But actually, the difficult part is only just begun. Now you have to look for your competitive advantage. Now you have to look at what is the thing that separates you from everybody else. Actually, remote working isn't the best thing for us, because Singapore prides itself on being a hub. And if you don't locate people in Singapore, actually it's a bit of a problem. Remote working can become a problem for us. I wanted to just finally sort of go back to that point on trust, which we were sort of talking about earlier. And I think that's important. And I wanted to relate that to actually the TACs. Government policies we put out government policies, right? In Singapore, fortunately, there is a high level of trust in the government, unlike many other cities in the world. And in fact, that is one reason why we have been able to get out of COVID fairly successfully. But actually, in implementing the policy on the ground, we need the TACs. We need structures and people and organizations like the TACs who can put a human face to it. People who can be both ways. I mean, you remember what MOS said? It was, you advocate, bridge, collaborate. Actually, the bridge part is very critical because you are on one hand conveying the needs of and I suppose the interests of the business to the government. But on the other hand, you're also helping to explain the considerations behind government policies, why government is doing certain things for us to the businesses. And that's very, very helpful in building that trust and understanding between the businesses and the government. And to do this, of course, again, going back to digitalization, in order for us to continue to build this trust, not only must you continue to play this role well, of course, you must also drink your own Kool-Aid, right? That's why a lot of the TACs are also going through the whole competency improvement, the upgrade, the digitalization. Even Enterprise Singapore is trying desperately to do the same, not only on the digitalization side, also on the sustainability side. We are doing, Satya said, go and calculate what my carbon emissions is, go and decide what we think we can do in terms of improving. I don't think we can reach zero emissions, but we will try our darndest to do that. That way, when you go out and talk to the companies, actually you have credibility and you continue to build the trust. Ultimately, trust is a reservoir, right?
Yeah.
You have to keep feeding it. You don't fill it, it will evaporate, it will go.
Definitely. Thanks for that. Frederica, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, no, I want to echo Jeffrey on the speed of change. I was also in endless conversation at SBF with Yim Yang or with Kurt speaking on how we digitalize, for endless discussion and workshop. And then every geopolitical tension or problem like COVID was, nobody could have thought you can come up with a vaccine in a year and a half. And nobody could have thought you can digitalize in 9 months. So to the same hope, you can apply probably the geopolitical tension today can force an even faster transition on energy, which is the same priority. On digitalization, and even if as somebody who tremendously miss the keyboard on the phone, I feel tremendously unqualified to speak about digitalization every
She's
time
the expert,
I hear.
really, it's not us.
But I want to make a point, even especially looking at the day tomorrow, which is on FTA. And Singapore has a great opportunity. You might have heard Singapore is signing a lot of digital partnership and
Yes.
digital agreement with a lot of countries.
Yeah.
It's a priority for Europe and is a priority for Singapore. For us, because we are discussing a digital partnership where we, as a chamber and as a business community, we see the utmost, most normal development 2 years in the FTA that we signed with Singapore. And it's about really making life easier, especially for SMEs who can save so much money on customs, so much money on, on shipment of goods. And that's even more true for SME than for MNC, because you save a lot on structure in your own company and on payrolls. So I think that the digital partnership is another aspect where Singapore becoming a trusted component, talk about trust before, with a very solid cybersecurity infrastructure, which is evolving even more. I think that's another tremendous opportunity to make Singapore stronger and even more interconnected, to remain a hub, more interconnected to the world. Now, after Chile, Australia, and Korea, I think, Japan, more countries coming. I think that UK, we're really looking forward of being the next one to make really Singapore a hub for digitalization.
No, absolutely. I think for us recently, we've also signed an MOU with Tech UK, which is literally the equivalent of SG Tech in the UK, and that was literally to coincide with the DEA that we signed between Singapore and UK. So these are opportunities that I think it was absolutely kind of it's also really based on trust, right? They obviously reached out to us when they said, hey, our governments are signing this, so I think we should actually come into collaboration. So I guess as we all talking, I keep thinking about also this topic about the leadership, right? So in terms of digitalization, right? And of course, I'm looking at you, Sheila, but obviously any one of you could take this question. So I'm just thinking, what is that critical ingredient that we need of the leadership who is going to be able to embrace, support, and kind of galvanize the digitalization process to begin with? Anyone have thoughts?
Shall I start at an
Yes.
organizational
Yes.
level and
Yes.
then they can step
Yes.
in subsequently?
Please.
I mean, I think I'd say it's acknowledgement that change is a constant, right? I know as cliched as it sounds, I think it's very easy for leaders to be intellectual about everything that's coming their way, whether it's in the sustainability space or everything that is important to the success of the organization. Leading from the front and the tone from the top in terms of appreciating what that is. Having a level of acknowledgement that leaders also have capability gaps in terms of I'm very glad you are going through a program in terms of appreciating what sustainability means for you as leaders. I think that signals volumes at an organizational level to people around. You don't have all the answers yet, but when you are actually leading from the front, discovering what is important together and laying that footprint and that path is going to speak volumes in terms of achieving the successes, and I would say almost capitalizing on the opportunities that present in front of us. So I mean, for me at an organizational level, I guess that's what I look for in my fellow leaders. And similarly, I assert that that's what employees look for directionally in the road ahead.
If I may just add
Yes.
on, I think just building on what all of them have been saying about both the sustainability and digitalization and trust. I think actually sustainability gives a unique opportunity for industry leaders in a sector to kind of bring the whole industry together and use digitalization as an enabler. Because if you see, companies have been largely focused on their own internal value chains, right? When they're implementing an SAP or a very large enterprise solution, a lot of it is very much focused on their business, right? And the boundaries of their universe.
Yeah.
Their suppliers have to deliver stuff into their system, but they don't care so much about what those suppliers do in relation to their own efforts to improve or digitalize, right? Whereas now, with the extent of data that is really needed in order to do good on the claims that you make as an organization, you have to bring your entire ecosystem with you.
Mhm.
And I think industry leaders or queen bees, the word that you used, and I think it's an ESG trademark, so I have to acknowledge
Yeah.
it, uh, uh,
Thank you.
is the role is much bigger in terms of driving these twin initiatives, right? And therefore, one way where the SMEs can really kind of benefit from this kind of upswell of, shall I say, focus is really be ready to receive some of that insight and some of that expertise so that they can move up with the so-called industry, the node in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a real opportunity for the smaller players. And those who are a bit more proactive and build up their own knowledge and leadership and skills, be more technology minded, uh, they will benefit enormously in this upswing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, thanks
Yeah,
for that.
I hate to drag this back to the sustainability topic, sorry, but I thought I'll use that as an example of
Yes.
what to illustrate what um, how we should think about this whole issue of leadership. Um, I agree with Satya and Sheila that for the large part, the role of the TAC is really to share information across industries, across companies to level everybody up. There will be some industries that will be ahead on the sustainability journey. Some TACs will therefore be ahead on the sustainability journey. So having symposiums like this where we know where everybody is and what are the things that some of the industries are doing, that will help. Within every industry, actually, there will also be companies that are doing better, right? So for instance, in the textile industry, I had lunch with Felicia Gunn of Gimli. Some of you will know her. And she was telling me that, oh, she cannot produce for Nike, she cannot produce for Gap unless she has all these certifications. She's got to sit exams, they got to go through audit, make sure that they do this and do that.
Yeah.
And she's a pathfinder for us because she does this. And so companies that are in the same industry learn from her, can move forward. So that's the first thing. I think the TACs have played a very important role in leading the charge for us to evolve towards a more sustainable system. Second, the main impact of sustainability for a large number of SMEs in the immediate term at least, apart from the regulatory aspect, is really in terms of energy prices, I think. It will manifest primarily, I think, in the next few years as higher costs through
Yeah.
energy. And so we have to think about how is to help our SMEs manage, and TACs again have a role. Certain industries will be you consume more energy, and so therefore there was a bigger priority for us, for you. And there will be opportunities where some companies, again, will go ahead and invest in energy efficient equipment or find ways of adjusting your business processes so that you're able to cope in the short term, bring some of the adjustment that you would otherwise have to make already forward.
Yes.
And again, if we are able to be a pathfinder in this, those that are leaders in this, make the adjustments on energy efficiency, please let the other companies, other TACs know. And then finally, I talked about this. TACs yourselves can be a pathfinder. I'm going through this at Enterprise Singapore on digitalization, on sustainability. I feel woefully inadequate because I don't understand a lot of the things that they tell me about the tech, about what is this that they're doing. But I know that it's important for us to do it. And I want to go through this journey myself. And I think if the TACs themselves go through this journey, learn, you'll be in a much better place to advise the companies, much better place to understand what's going on. So that would be leadership to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. I think, like I shared earlier, this is the kind of the journey that we went through as well. Because we don't have all the answers, right? And we often said that, but we're actually surrounded by a community of solution providers and basically people who are able to solve some of these problems. And I think from our own journey, as you shared, is also a case whereby sometimes it's almost that it's I guess sometimes we tend to see things as dichotomous, but they're not. So of course, we started talking about data centers this year, right? And we all know, what we all went through, with the moratorium and everything. And the interesting thing is I have all the members, our DC community, they're always constantly saying that, challenge us, the industry, to actually be sustainable. There can be a sustainable, data center, which is obviously the direction that we're going down right now. So I think that's absolutely kind of why we want to say that the mindset shift, not dichotomous, and then sometimes, even within SG Tech, we kind of say it's yes and, it's not but. So I think that in itself the whole internal culture, the shift, the way we think or the way we talk, sometimes very subliminally, it actually changes the way people think. So, Frederico, from your perspective, being, I guess, the European chambers, I mean, is there anything that, I guess that could be different that you encountered here versus, where you're from?
Well, on leadership specifically, I think that leadership globally has changed stance in a positive way. I think we can treasure Europe has been definitely going fast on sustainability since many years in the past. I don't think was all right. I think that on regulation, we have to be very careful. Singapore, again, has a role because translating what global evolved standard wants to what a constituency like Southeast Asia can accept, it's crucial. So I think that on taxonomy, on the way you approach regulation in sustainability, you can adapt something, you can copy and adapt and improve, of course, something. I think that from the debate I saw when I was growing up, it was very political and ideological. And what I treasure is really what I told you before, try to have some economic sense in all this and to do things because we can really benefit, make more money, give more jobs, because in the end, if we don't do that, we have a problem. And that's true in developing countries, as that is also in less developing country. Rising water is a problem from Singapore, which is a rich country, to Venice, to Maldives, which is a poor country, which risks to sink. So the ecosystem and biodiversity in Southeast Asia is a problem in developing as much as in developed country. Leadership are changing and in many industries. So we have to start thinking that what we were doing until 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's not applicable anymore. Jeffrey's reference to try to understand in energy cost what industry needs more or less, it's interesting. I was quoting some time ago, some weeks ago, probably when Jeffrey was listening to the sustainability conversation, but I was really very impressed. If you look at fashion, fashion became a very ill-conceived industry by being an industry whereby you have to produce 6 collections a year. I was always been shocked when I'm from Italy and you go around in August and you're hot, you want a pair of Bermuda and you find only winter jackets and ski clothes because that's the next season and that's what is out by September in the shops. That's crazy. And you cannot think that having 6 collections is fostering creativity. And that's not said by me, but I was quoting in this event, I was quoting Giorgio Armani saying this. Right. So even the leaders of the industry believes that in some industry we went too far. And it's not about really using the paper straw instead of a plastic straw, which is a classic example on sustainability, probably a bit trivial as well. But it's really understanding whether in some industries, was it really all necessary? Or we were really going too far and continuing because it was just like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that, and that thing takes, and that's why I really applaud Singapore government because in the SG plan 2030, they inserted Ministry of Education as a key stakeholder. Because without creating a robust education among people, you go nowhere because right. You won't have the understanding to see how the economy will change and what to pay, what's important to the people.
Absolutely, and what you said also just reminded me about the fact that we spoke about ecosystem, how important that is, right? So because when we're trying to solve a problem, sometimes if you're just trying to solve a problem and actually you're doing it in silo, so you're not necessarily solving a bigger problem. And that's, I think, the reason why we want to start looking at things like the ecosystem perspective, and then that would actually, I would say, encourage collaboration, cross knowledge share, and things that we think is actually important, because some of these things that we're saying that is actually the challenges are bigger than the company. It's actually at the industry level, and in some cases, I mean, obviously now we have a global so-called shared problem with climate change. So I think certainly, thank you all of you for sharing that. So we have a bit of time for one last question. So I would just throw it to the floor before we do a close. So this question is, I mean, anyone, and of course it's about emerging markets. So we did speak a bit about, us, Singapore, as compared to other markets. So how well do you assess, and in this case it's coming back to the TAC community. So how well do you assess the TAC communities in raising awareness of emerging markets around the world? And what can they do to strengthen their capabilities in this regard? So I think it's almost kind of alluding to internationalization or certainly to that kind of initiatives. So anyone wants to take it first?
Yeah, maybe I can
Satya,
start.
please.
and that's probably make my closing remarks as that, so we don't have much time. I think I just start with a story because during COVID, and it's still vivid. Uh, we did this work for SG Clean. Many of you may wish that it's no longer needed following all the announcements. But believe it or not, it was really a lifesaver for many countries who adopted similar practices. And kind of we at KPMG were at the heart of helping many other countries actually adopt similar practices. All of it done virtually out of Singapore. And we pitched to like 20 odd countries, just out of our studies in Singapore, in countries as far away as Colombia and the Bahamas and, all kinds of places. So why am I telling you this? Again, as TACs and as smaller enterprises, your marginal cost of sale through virtualization is zero. And if you
Yes.
think about it, the biggest barrier to many of you tackling emerging markets, whether it's Chile or Latin America, or Peru, or some other countries which are quite far away, by the way. A trip would take like a week, right? And then after that, if you didn't get business, gone. You've lost a lot of money. But you can do all of that virtually, and I think that idea of being virtually unlimited, which the Emerging Stronger Task Force talked about, is real. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to explore emerging markets. And I think we should really use it. But let's not also forget that in the end, when you do all of this virtually, the human moment becomes increasingly important. So there will have to be that one interaction with the customer, not maybe 20 or 30, which is physical, but that will really count. Because like today we're having this conference and we're going to have many more of these, but believe it or not, everyone we meet, we're really making those physical encounters count today, because we've not met these people for so long. And mind you, I think that is both the opportunity and the challenge for digitalization. You're going to meet your customers much less, but whenever you meet them, make it count.
Yep. Absolutely, Satya. In fact, I share a private joke with my team in regards to this whole hybrid model. Obviously now virtually connecting, and then subsequently when borders open up, when there's opportunity, people actually meet, because the human connection is still very important. But I used to actually I liken it to the business world has finally gone to the route of online dating. Actually we're slower, right? Because the consumers are already caught on to that model, right? And then we're just catching up. But absolutely, as what Moslow has said earlier, there's certain things that we don't actually just because we're opening up. There's certain things that should stay. I certainly believe that that this hybrid model is one absolutely to stay, because that also allows us to, like this afternoon we hear from a speaker who's actually not here, and in Germany. So I think those are the things that the value that we can extract from that. So it's not to throw everything out and so-called revert back, because there's no reverting back. We're just only moving forward. So now I would like to kind of give everyone a bit of a maybe a last words of advice before we wrap up. So maybe I'll start with you, Sheila.
Well, advice is a big word. I think, at least in the space of talent and the journey of building capabilities for yourselves as TACs, and also getting your businesses to focus on these areas, uh, I come back to opportunities. And I think the journey ahead is exciting. It's not an easy one, because there's a lot of knowledge gap, capability gap, etc. But there's lots of platforms to access. There's a lot of tools to leverage, but more importantly, the power of the network, and which is what you stand for, should not be lost for everyone here today. So I think that ability to leverage and say, walk away and say you're not in it alone, I think is something I hope you take away and entirely exploit and leverage after this conference.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Satya?
I've spoken.
Okay, Jeffrey?
Well, since the session is about TACs, I think I'll just end up with saying my three hopes for the TACs as we go forward. So Enterprise Singapore was formed 4 years ago out of a merger of IE Singapore and Spring. Our mission was to grow local companies, help the big companies, the top companies go global, help uplift the broad base of SMEs. And TACs are key partners in this effort. MOS talked about your 3 roles: advocate, bridge, collaborate. What I would like, I think, going forward is that the TACs continue to focus on 3 things. Number 1, to be able to continue to build up capabilities. We talked about that, whether it's in sustainability or digitalization, just building up a human capital. We've explored the ground here. I think everybody knows that this is an important area for us to do that. So that's important, let's do that. Number 2, to build a culture of collaboration, to work together across industries, across TACs, across the leadership. I have this formal example here, which I will kind of like quickly read out, about how there's an alliance for action between SBF, Singapore Furniture's, SFIC, and Singapore Green Building to go to build and create sustainable enhanced spaces. This is a formal example. I'll tell you an informal example, which I really liked. I was having lunch with Felicia that day at Dempsey. And then I bumped into Boon Huat and Simon from SFIC, me having lunch with Wilson. I bumped into Boon Huat and Charmaine from SFIC. And then he was having lunch with Wilson and Simon from TAF. Am I correct? And they were discussing what else they could do, synergy between fashion and furniture. That's amazing. That's amazing leadership and amazing collaboration. I want to encourage all of you all to do a little bit more of that. And then finally, to invest in leadership, elect good leaders, people who are forward-looking, people who are able to see the national agenda, understand, be able to translate what is the national interest, convey that, play your role as a bridge and as an advocate. At the same time, also lead the way, because all of you are business leaders, you all are the best in the fields, you all know your industries well, you all have gone ahead. One final story. Kurt, I don't know whether he's still here, but I had dinner with him at SBF that day. He was sitting beside me as the host. He was telling me about how he had spent the last 3 months in China, 2 months voluntarily, 2 months on business, 1 month involuntarily. Maybe not involuntarily because he was trying to escape his family. But anyway, he had a good time. And he was telling me about the wonderful things that was happening in China and how he was going to come back and tell all the SME members that actually you can do business in China and you have to be first before the borders open, and then you are just like everybody else. So these are forward-looking leaders. These are people who have been in this business for a long time. They know how to set the right example. They're moving forward. And I think it's very important for the TACs to have good leadership. So those 3 things: collaboration, competency, leadership.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I don't know if you know, a few of us actually on a WhatsApp group actually.
I'm sorry?
we are quite a few of us are actually on a WhatsApp group.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, so we do exchange notes,
Very
every now
good,
and then.
very good.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah, thanks. Federico?
Well, it's Thursday evening. It's got a last panel of the day. It's 6. Jeffrey summarized very well. So I think that after a dense panel, the only advice that I really feel strongly to give is to pick up the phone and call your favorite restaurant. So book for Tuesday night. Bring your wife, your partner, your friend, your husband, and just make sure you're not home before 10:30, but at least midnight. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, we're well within time, but I think that's us. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Sheila, Satya, Jeffrey, and Federico. It's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for being with us. I guess it's a wrap.